Not only is Castlevania Symphony of the Night a masterpiece of video game design, it's teeming with references to history, religion, literature, and folklore. This is the Annotated Symphony of the Night. These are the Catacombs, the lowest reach of the castle and one of the most densely packed areas for its items and themes. A catacomb is any subterranean location where one would bury the dead, but are largely used in religious locations like the lowest area of a church basilica. Ancient Romans employed them, however, possibly dating their use to before the Christian age. As you'll see as we make our way through it, Dracula has made particular use out of this one over time, but one can't help but wonder who might be buried down here. There are an awful lot of dead bodies encased in these walls, as these underground cemeteries tend to have, but what could centuries-old vampires like this one have kept in this place? We'll find the answer soon enough. Right from the beginning, we're grave robbing two nice pieces of equipment, the Bloodstone and cat-eyed Circlet. The former is a pendant accessory that boosts recovery of various blood healing techniques, such as the Dark Metamorphosis spell. The Circlet is named for a hard gemstone called cymophane, which is a type of chrysoberyl, normally referred to as a cat's eye due to its translucent yellow-green hue. In the game, it raises intelligence by +8 and has the highly situational effect of healing Alucard when he's hit by a cat, something that's not even possible until several videos from now. These were-skeleton enemies originate from Rondo of Blood. The Japanese name for them is the Panther Skeleton, which is actually pointed out in their in-game bestiary description. Like in Rondo, they actually take two forms, one bipedal and one quad, like an actual panther. They drop a strength potion and a garnet to sell to the librarian. This bone arc enemy is oddly very versatile. Called the High Mobility Bone Pillar in the Japanese version, it can actually shoot projectiles at you from a variety of angles, and is a sort of electronic burst attack as well. The skeleton priests that carry it don't have an entry in the librarian's bestiary, but can be dealt with before killing the bone arc itself. Killing one will drop one end of the litter, while the other struggles to continue its journey. Killing both will drop the litter to the ground, but the bone arc will still be able to swivel itself and attack you. Killing the arc before either of the priests will cause them to run away from you in fear. All of them drop Monster Vial 3, but the bone arc alone drops a Skull Shield, which raises Alucard's defense by +4. Its Shield Rod spell is a callback to one of Dracula's alternate forms in Castlevania III Dracula's Curse for the NES. You wouldn't be alone if you passed through this room and thought it was just an empty space, since these coffins blend into the background. Cutting through them will either yield a Monster Vial 3 or a Blood Skeleton, though. Appropriate, I suppose, that there are Gravekeeper enemies here, but the Hellfire Beast is certainly more interesting. It can summon pillars of fire from below Alucard and shoot bolts of lightning from its fingers, which factors into its mythological namesake of Amduskius, which is its name in the Japanese version. Amduskius was a great king of hell according to the Lesser Key of Solomon and Johann Weyer's Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, that had a humanoid form at the head of a unicorn and claws for hands and feet. It could give concerts when summoned and would appear to the sound of trumpets. The Wikipedia entry for this being says it's in charge of the cacophonous music that plays in the underworld, which connects to its in-game description that says it's the musician from hell. It can drop the Lightning Mail, which raises defense by +8 and is strong against lightning attacks, and some Fire Mail. Take note of this background and the fire at our feet. It's guarded over by Losoth, known as Bifron in the Japanese version. Bifron is a demon of hell, one of the Earls, that transports corpses from their original graves to new places and will leave magic lights that appear not unlike candles upon them. It's said in the Lesser Key of Solomon that Bifron will appear as a monster but changes into a humanoid form when summoned. Losoth, however, is the name of a subset of men from Tolkien's Book of Unfinished Tales that lived in the snowy northern waste of Forod Waith. No, the reference doesn't make a lot of sense, but regardless it will drop a sirloin and the Firebrand sword. The Japanese version of the game calls this Agni's Flame. Like the Thunderbrand's reference to Indra, Agni is the Hindu god of fire. In Sanskrit, Agni literally translates into fire, so the word will occasionally be used interchangeably. The in-game description, however, names it as the Fire Sword of Oberon. This is a curious reference, as Oberon was the king of fairies in various Renaissance literature over the centuries, including perhaps his most famous appearance as sort of an antagonist in William Shakespeare's comedy A Midsummer Night's Dream. He does, in his way, appear in Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust in an interlude, but there's very little connection to demonology within that to justify his name being dropped here in the game. Either way, the sword will attack with a fire burst using a fireball motion. It's one of the more useful elemental swords in the game, as more enemies tend to be weak to fire as opposed to ice and thunder. Okay, we're going to stay put for a while to talk about the Discus Lord, or Disc Armor in the Japanese version, and further games it appears in. When it dies, not only does it have a cool animation of its individual pieces getting pulled into the void, but the disc it throws will either drop at its feet and can still hurt Alucard, or be flung away from it depending on its position during the death blow. It drops a chakram, which is one of the unique throwing weapons in the game for a couple of reasons. First, 2 can be tossed at a time if the attack button is hit repeatedly, and if another is equipped in the offhand, a few can be tossed in succession. Second, a sonic boom motion will make for an extended throw. Finally, the chakram can be thrown actually while running, which is unique amongst most weapons in the game. Chakrams are circular weapons that originated in India and are used for both throwing and hand-to-hand combat. Early writings say that it was the weapon choice of the Hindu god Vishnu, but was used extensively by Sikh Nihang fighters in northern India in the 1700s, which is even referenced in its in-game description. The Discus Lord also drops the very interesting Jewel Sword. Though it has relatively low attack power for this stage of the game, this weapon makes enemies drop sellable gems with various frequency based on the gem's rarity. A fireball motion will also spawn a handful of coins out of thin air. The Saturn version of the game, though, gives this weapon the extra ability to add to its stats if Alucard equips gems into the accessory slots alongside the Jewel Sword. The more rare the gem, the more substantial the attack boost given to the weapon. Sadly, this didn't make it into the PlayStation version. Here's a free ballroom mask that's also dropped by Bone Pillars. This item is the Walk Armor, or Walk Master in Japan. It boosts defense by +1 for about every 60 rooms that Alucard uncovers as he makes his way through the game. Again, each, quote, room is one blue square on the map. That means that if we were to map the entirety of the game, all 1,890 rooms, the Walk Armor's final defensive boost should be +32, rounded up from 31.5. It also drops intelligence by -5. Even with its raw stat boosts, we'll find stronger stuff by the end of the game. Meet the boss of the area, the Grand Falloon. You don't have to look too closely to see its grotesque shape formed by human corpses which it showers upon you. Of course, this is simply the shell of an inner parasite which represents the real boss. We have to cut our way through the bodies to find it. Its name is a reference to a concept coined by author Kurt Vonnegut in his seminal 1963 novel Cat's Cradle. It is a word that means a proud and meaningless association of human beings. It's generally used cynically, as no association of human beings is really meaningful outside of base survival. So groups like a basketball team or your work friends or the people you would politely force to watch this video series are all ultimately Granfaloons. The United States is a Granfaloon then, as are Catholics, Jews, and any other religion according to this concept, in that it's a group with a shared purpose within meaningless actual connection. What's more important to us in the here and now is this enemy's other name, Legion, which it was called in the Japanese version in all future appearances in the Castlevania universe. It's a biblical horde of demons cast out of a man in Gerasene by Jesus of Nazareth as one of his many miracles witnessed during his ministry. The encounter between Jesus and the demons is accounted for in 3 of the 4 Gospels and tells of a man whom lived in tombs that was too strong to be bound by the locals by ropes or chains. He was confronted by Jesus by falling to his knees while the demons inside him pleaded not to be cast out of the man. When Jesus asked the demon's name, which is a common move in exorcisms, it simply replied, "I am Legion, for we are many." He then gave Legion permission to possess a drove of pigs, whom promptly drowned themselves. Now, let's reflect on the past few events that have taken place on Alucard's path to this point. We let a boatman, not unlike in Greek myth, bear us across the water to an underworld filled with the dead, defended by a mythological watchdog before entry. In this lowest point on the map, we've passed over the fire and fought both a great king and earl of hell, and have finally met one of the few demons mentioned by name in the Christian Bible. All of this represents Alucard's own descent into the abyss. As in many stories about a hero that descends into the underworld, not unlike the Greek Orpheus though, we're here to retrieve something precious. We'll find that in a little bit. This is the Mormagil, a sword akin to the other elemental brand weapons with a dark affinity that's strong against holy enemies. Like the Tyrfing we found in the Keep, it doesn't have the opportunity to take advantage of this property, as there are only 2 holy enemies in the whole game. It's a substantially stronger weapon than that one though, and in line with the other elemental swords as far as strength, though it doesn't contain a magical burst attack like they do. Let's take a look at the map. The Mormagil is actually another subtle nudge by the designers to follow a designed path through the game, but it diverges a bit here. These catacombs are split down the middle so that one side holds the tool used to completely map the castle, while the other side contains a weapon meant to specifically kill its final boss. Since we're following the optimal path to this point, it's no big deal to us. A new player, though, will likely kill the Granfaloon first and take this weapon further up to that boss before doubling back with the necessary items needed to complete the catacombs. It's a subtle way for the designers to keep the players curious about filling in the blanks and then ultimately rewarding themselves for that curiosity. Let's go see what's over the other side. Thus far, the slime enemy is the only one in the game that originated in the MSX version of the original Castlevania. They would pop out of candles as booby traps. They and their larger reddish counterpart are immune to cut damage, but they're also some of the only enemies in the game that do not drop any items. Like other portions of the castle that require multiple abilities to map, this room would be many first-time players' stopping point. It requires the form of Bat, which we wouldn't have been able to get here without, but also the sonar-like Echo of Bat relic that we obtained from defeating Orlocks. While it's possible to fly through this spiked room without it in what would be an extreme game of memory testing, the Echo of Bat certainly makes it easier. The cross shuriken that we just found is one step up from the regular shuriken projectile that's commonly dropped from a few enemies that we'll run into a little bit later. It's a powerful consumable also dropped from the Blade Master that we saw in the Colosseum. Here's a curiously random pork bun in the corner. The Spikebreaker armor that we've now found is the real reason to dive into the Catacombs. The strong armor by itself, with a boost of defense by plus 12, it also has the handy ability to permanently destroy spikes on the ground, which is an ability necessary for mapping the castle. This completes our time in Hell, so let's make our way out of it. We've only got one major area in the castle left to map before doing some cleanup. And funny enough, we could have begun making our way through it from the beginning of the game, that we couldn't have gotten very far. And here we are at the Clock Tower, a classic Castlevania location. Join us next time as we map the last major area. See you then.